So fellow Toastmasters, Mr. Toastmaster, our welcome, very welcome guest. Liberty. It's protected under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Any person who has the lawful right, the ability to take away somebody's liberty in Canadian society, is arguably the most powerful person in the country. The Army doesn't have the power to take away liberty, except under the most extreme circumstances. The office of the Prime Minister doesn't have the power to take away somebody's liberty, except in the most extreme circumstances. Even the Canadian Security and Information Service, CSIS, our spy agency, can't even directly take away somebody's liberty. The police, they do have the power. It's called the power of arrest, and it's part of their job. There is another group, however, who does have the power. It's a much larger group, a much more powerful group. It's you. The law allows you to make what's known as a citizen's arrest. Now I'll get into the details of the technical details of what a citizen's arrest is in a minute, but in brief, it's something that's provided by the law to each of us. You don't even have to be a citizen, which is why I use quotation marks. You can be any person in Canada can make a citizen's arrest. You're able, under the law, to stop and restrain somebody, in other words, arrest, who you've witnessed committing a crime. This is a very dangerous action to take, I'll tell you right now. I don't recommend it, and it's something that should be left to the professionals. However, given that it's a power that each of you has under the law, it's worthwhile for you to at least understand what it's all about should you ever want to use that power. So let's dive a little deeper, because the devil can really be in the details. But before we get into the criminal code, which is our criminal law in Canada, what actually are your rights? The Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada guarantees our rights. So to read from it, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, this is section 1 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. I'm reading from this deliberately because the word in each word is deliberate, and I'll be doing more of that throughout the presentation. Now what that means is that your rights are guaranteed as long as they make sense. It's pretty much what that says. Section 7 says everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. What that means is that liberty is right up there. It's right up there. And however, your liberty is limited by the spirit of the law. So let's talk about the law. This is the Criminal Code of Canada, published by Martins. It's a pretty substantial book. Every criminal law is set out in this book. I don't know if it's one of my favorite books or not, but it's certainly an interesting read.
It's good for finding records.
It's divided among many parts. Part 16 of the book is called Compelling Appearance of Accused Before a Justice and Interim Release. In other words, getting somebody from having allegedly committed a crime to being in front of a judge. That's what that means. And section 494 is called Arrest Without Warrant by Any Person. I'm going to read that, and if you've never had the privilege of reading from the criminal code, This will be interesting. Arrest without warrant by any person. Section 494. Anyone may arrest without warrant a person whom he finds committing an indictable offense, or a person who, on reasonable grounds, he believes has committed a criminal offense and is escaping from and freshly pursued by persons who have lawful authority to arrest that person. Anyone who is the owner or a person in lawful possession of property, or a person authorized by the owner or by a person in lawful possession of property, may arrest without warrant a person whom he finds committing a criminal offense on or in relation to that property. And lastly, anyone other than a peace officer who arrests a person without warrant shall forthwith deliver that person to a peace officer. Wow, that's quite the mouthful. You get all that? Probably not. Let's step through it. Arrest without warrant by any person. Anyone may arrest without warrant. Anyone is you. You don't have to be a citizen. A warrant, that's an issue from a judge that says that a person has to be brought before the court. Anyone may arrest without warrant a person whom he finds committing an indictable offense. Finds committing means you actually have to see it happen. Finds committing isn't, I heard a noise and somebody ran and somebody said he just hit me. That's not finds committing. This is a very important part of the criminal code in relation to the powers of the citizen's arrest. An indictable offense, there's three categories of offenses, well, officially two. Indictable and summary. We're not going to even get into that because I could talk for hours about that as well. There's a lot of detail here, and this is very important. If you want to perform a arrest without warrant as a person, you need to know this. A person who is on reasonable grounds he believes has committed a criminal offense and is escaping from and freshly pursued by persons who have lawful authority to arrest that person. In other words, if you are standing in the parking lot of the shopping center and some guy runs out carrying a 52-inch big screen TV, running, and then there's a guy behind him that's wearing what looks like a uniform. The uniform says guard, or it says police, or something like that on it, maybe even auxiliary constable. You can presume that that person is escaping from and is freshly pursued in that moment by a person who has lawful power of arrest. You can perform a citizen's arrest in that case. Also, anyone who is the owner or a person in lawful possession of property. Property is anything. Property could be real estate. It's something that can be stolen is one of actually the interesting definitions of property. So if you have property, you can also be a person who is authorized by the owner to have this property. Maybe you're a renter. You're allowed to be in your place. You're authorized to be there. Or maybe I gave Jens my book. He's authorized to have that book. May arrest without warrant a person whom he finds committing a criminal offense on or relation to that property. Again, finds committing. This is key. You actually have to witness the offense occurring. And finally, this is the important part, anyone other than a peace officer who arrests a person without warrant shall forthwith, wonderful word, deliver that person to a peace officer. You can't lock them up in the basement.
Sit on them?
You can't, well, forthwith. So part of this book, it's a dictionary. You gotta love big books. Multitasking. It's also a dictionary. The meaning of forthwith. If you've ever been pulled over on the side of the road and asked forthwith to deliver a breath sample for immediate analysis, this is what forthwith means. Forthwith does not mean instantly, but merely as soon as is reasonably practicable under all the circumstances. In other words, ASAP, within reason. There's a lot there. That's a lot of information, and that's why people go to school for years to be lawyers and be able to understand the law. It's more than just citizen's arrest. It's important to understand how the law is written and what this means. To be able to perform a citizen's arrest, some of it's common sense, some of it not as much. The law gives you all the power you need to arrest somebody under the right circumstances. However, it's nothing like the movies. Arresting somebody is a messy, messy business. Having someone's personal freedom taken away, nobody likes that. You see it in the rest of the world. People do a lot for their freedom. It opens the person up, affecting the arrest, to a lot of personal and legal risk. You can do it. You're allowed. But please be careful. Mr. Toastmaster.